You have the boy's magic.
No, this magic belongs to no boy.
You know, I think this scene is trying to harken back to that moment from Lord of the Rings, when Éowyn killed the Witch King.
I am no man.
But I don't think it hit the same way. It also sounds like she's taking credit for Tinkerbell's magic. Both she and Hook did not give Tink the proper recognition, which isn't cool. So Hollywood's had a rough go of it the last few years. They were hit very hard by the pandemic, especially when it comes to movie theaters. Even major companies like Disney, who once dominated the box office, have had their share of struggles. We do get some gems like Encanto, but they also have flops like Strange World, and more recently, their live-action remake of Peter Pan, which many agree fails to capture the magic of the original and is largely boring, which is exactly what I thought about the film. I found it hard to get through just because it was so dull. I don't know how they expect this to keep a child's attention. When they finally arrive at Neverland, Wendy says it's amazing and she could never imagine anything like it, but it's just an island. There's nothing particularly magical or special about it. It's a shame to see Disney produce this kind of content, considering the fact that they have decades and decades of history and were typically seen as the industry standard. These remakes are largely being seen now as soulless and cash-grabbing in nature, and it's not surprising to see why. They do feel like they're lacking in many ways. I don't want to be too hard on the actors since they are just kids, but their performances are a bit dull, and unfortunately it doesn't even seem to be just this movie. Just look at Melissa McCarthy as Ursula compared to the original. The original Ursula had so much personality and sass, but here she comes off as just flat.
Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?
Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?
We'll have to wait for the movie to come out before we can judge the performance as a whole, but since the trailers are the first impression that an audience gets of a movie, you'd think they want to put their best foot forward. Everything just feels so drab and watered down, no pun intended. I have nothing against these actors, but it does kind of feel like they just showed up for a paycheck. I had the same problem with Tom Hanks' performance in the live-action Pinocchio. At least Halle Bailey's trying, although I'm not sure how much she has to work with. They literally give Ariel amnesia according to the novelization. They keep trying to fix these movies, even though they weren't really problems to begin with. They've been doing this for a while now, like saying that the remake of Beauty and the Beast is more empowering and feminist because they gave Belle boots and had her invent a washing machine, or watered down the Pleasure Island scene in Pinocchio by removing any traces of alcohol and tobacco, and has Pinocchio question everything on Pleasure Island instead of going along with it and having to face the consequences for it like in the original. I guess they were worried children would emulate the main character, so they wanted to tone down his bad behavior, but the entire point of Pinocchio was to teach children a lesson by having them see how it didn't work out for Pinocchio so they wouldn't emulate his actions. So sanitizing it like this kinda defeats the purpose of the narrative. It looks like they're doing something similar with The Little Mermaid too, trying to make it illegal to go to the surface, so Ariel has obeyed that, and according to the novelization, she never goes to the surface until she sees Eric's ship. Instead they changed Scuttle to be a diving bird, so she brings Ariel random stuff from the surface. That way Ariel wouldn't be breaking the rules. At least not as much as the original, except it opens a new can of worms because one of the main criticisms for Ariel was that she left the sea for a man, except this time she literally goes to the surface for the first time just to see Eric's ship. So in their attempt to fix this perceived problem, they added to a different perceived problem. They're also infamously changing the lyrics to some of the songs, for the sake of modern sensibilities, except removing them from their context and trying to change them is also adding to other issues. Now they're implying that only verbal consent is valid. I mean, she's literally leaning forward and puckering her lips. How else are you supposed to interpret that? Plus, it's ironic that they were concerned about Eric forcing himself on her when in the original it was kind of the other way around. But again, they're taking the song out of context. Same thing with Poor Unfortunate Souls, where Ursula manipulates Ariel into giving up her voice, which may be wrong, but she is the villain, that's kind of the point. It's really only an issue if the narrative backs them up, which The Little Mermaid doesn't do, and Ursula gets punished in the end. Speaking of mermaids, I do think it's a shame that they got removed in Peter Pan. The mermaids, which in my opinion were the coolest things we saw in the trailer, ended up only being a cameo. I'm assuming they were removed because they didn't want the girls fighting over Peter like they did in the original. Tinkerbell is also not shown to have a crush on him at all, but they could have still had them do something fun and adventurous, like Pirates of the Caribbean but with kids. Instead they just removed them entirely. I also think it's a little weird that the mermaids were shown to have bioluminescence so they could glow, but Tinkerbell doesn't, except when she does does, but I guess ignore that. Most of the time she's barely visible because the lighting in this movie is awful. The director addressed this in an interview where he says, "We all imagine Tinkerbell glowing, but then you're like, where's the light actually coming from? Do her wings light up?" That's the difference between animation and what looks right in live action. Although I'd argue it doesn't look right in live action. Seriously, I can barely see anything, let alone Tinkerbell. Besides, she's a fairy. Why would anyone question her glowing? How can the director have such little imagination? It's a shame the movie came out so dull and boring. They did try to add to the story, but I don't think it really landed well. They made Wendy kind of rude, where at the beginning of the movie she throws her brothers under the bus because she doesn't want to get in trouble, even though it was her fault, and she plays way rougher with them than she needs to. She straight up tells them that it's every pirate for themselves, but then she gets annoyed and frustrated with Peter when he's acting obnoxious, and she smacks him across the face. I think this could have been a good learning moment where she realizes that she wasn't acting much better than Peter, and that can help her in her character arc of having to eventually accept the fact that she is going to grow up. But instead she kinda just ignores all of that. She lays into him and tells him how awful he's being, but who is she to judge? And her hitting him was really uncalled for. Plus it makes her look like a hypocrite. I think they were trying to focus on interpersonal relationships with this film, but they ended up forgetting about the magic and wonder aspect of the story, and they made Peter look like a jerk. Sure, he's always been portrayed as immature, but here he banished James Hook, who was his best friend and a lost boy, because he missed his mom. But he ended up getting lost and found by the pirates, which is how he became Captain Hook. Meanwhile, another child in the movie says that he misses his mom too, but Peter doesn't banish him. He probably knows that Wendy and the other children will judge him for it, so instead he storms off and has a pity party. I'm not really that interested in all this melodrama though, at least not to the extent that it's presented, or maybe they could have at least made it more compelling, like having a fun adventure with some personal stakes, instead of whatever we're getting here. I'm not surprised the Mario movie did so well. While the movie wasn't perfect, it was fun, colorful, and imaginative. It wasn't the most friendly to newcomers, but there was still a lot to enjoy, although it seems like the critics were blindsided by it. But I hope its success can have a positive influence on Hollywood. I think it's good to give Hollywood more competition, and moviegoers more options. Plus it's nice to see the video game movie curse basically not being a problem anymore. And Mario and Sonic both have successful movie franchises. Good for them. Hopefully Disney will be able to recapture the magic, especially with the looming threat of the Nintendo Cinematic Universe. In the meantime, I'm excited for Wish. Hopefully it'll be another hit like Encanto. But those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Adam K, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Bandito Bane, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, Dashhound, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Miranda Sinistra, Butcher7 Actual, Felix Spam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Data Dine Executive, Jay Draws, Ninja Rex, and Lil. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. You can also support the channel by leaving a like on this video and subscribing. It helps us out a lot and it's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way, and a link to that will be in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone!